was fairly big in Bangalore. But we felt that there were many advantages as far as Madras is concerned, and we should go ahead and create a facility here with doing both the domestic work and the overseas work. And that was the brief that was given to me. It took me for about 4 years before we set the conditions, and then we went in and we bought this IBM computer. And just tell you how small TCS was at that point in time, that the investment in IBM computer mainframe 3090 150E was the total gross block was larger than all the gross blocks of computers put together in TCS at that point in time. And so I was telling Mr. Kohli that you're betting the company as a result of putting this one. We were a reasonably small company. So he said, okay, that's a challenge that I'm giving you, so we will go ahead and create that one. That fundamentally changed the Madras landscape because even as far as 1988, when we installed the computer, January of 1988, when we installed the computer, the total number of software professionals in Madras was less than 1,500, of which about 800 came from TCS. All the other companies put together. By then, of course, there were many large installations. Of course, Hinditron had set up things in, I think Ashok Leyland was, Ashok Mirza had set up the DEC computer and so on. And then Hindustan Motors had a computer department, fairly big one. KCP had a computer department. So there were a number of computer installations, in-house facilities and so on that was there. But even so, the number of professionals was not very much. That was the time that we had. And today, of course, TCS itself has over 100,000 people in this city. So it has altered quite a bit. So, it fundamentally changed because we started working towards creating the right kind of ecosystem in Madras at that time. What was the reason why Mr. Kohli, who was a great visionary, and I'm going to talk a little about him, why did he choose Madras? In fact, there used to be a very funny story which he himself told me, and normally he doesn't exaggerate. So in Bombay House, when he went there once, and they criticized him for having a lot of Punjabis in his organization and in senior management, because there used to be one YP Sani who was working with him and a few others. So he says that he came back to Air India building and asked for the list of senior people, and he found Ramadurai, Mahalingam and so on. And he said, what are these people talking about in terms of... But at that time he felt that, there was a lot of talent here. There was considerable amount of educational leadership that was built here. Of course, there were many other places also, but IIT Madras had a fairly good computer program. 1973 was when Professor Muthukrishnan, Professor Mahabala and others came in, and then they started this department, and they had a 360 at that point in time, and then they were growing. Guindy Engineering College was another pioneer as far as computing was concerned, computer science program was concerned. PSG was another very, very important. And many of these locations became places where we would go and recruit people. And therefore, although Bangalore was also very important because the Indian Institute of Science was where many of the people, and there were many other engineering colleges there and so on from where we were recruiting. Mr. Kohli at that time felt that it would be an interesting area to grow in, and Madras became a very important one. So education was very important from a ecosystem building perspective, and we were not really wrong. Even in the 90s when we started major recruitments and so on, the number of institutions from which we would continue to grow and recruit from started increasing, and we managed to get a fair number of people. So that was a very important thing. The second thing that was interesting from a point of view from Madras was that it was a place where the infrastructurally it was a very good place. Mr. Kohli had told me when I started the expansion here with the installation of IBM, he said that you're going to get a lot of senior people coming from Bombay, because that is where we had started and so on. and I'm going to be sending them. So you have got a challenge on your hand. What you have got to do is that they have got to, and Vinayambika will recollect, we were on Cathedral Road at that point in time. So he told me that any of your employees should not travel for more than half an hour, even from a public transport. That was the maximum. They should have their children go into school there, and they should be able to get admission to school. And the third thing he said was that from a healthcare perspective, there should be enough capability so that they don't get worried on that score. So these three, if you can make a person comfortable with school admission, with facility not too far from where you are, and with healthcare, in a matter of 3 months, then you know that you have succeeded in being able to attract people. And we attracted a number of people to come, including, of course, Lakshmi Narayan. He is from here, Cognizant, but he was in Bombay, and we brought him here at a certain point in time to grow the business and so on. So Lakshmi, many others could come here, and they had absolutely no problem in it. This thing. So the infrastructure was a very important one. As we started growing, we felt that we needed to get far more from an infrastructure point of view. And one of the big defining points was identification of a place where we could grow further. Campuses were talked about at that time. Infosys was building one. Of course, we built our Sholinganallur facility before, started planning that and building that before Infosys started their Bangalore big campus and so on. But we would say that we are more or less around the same time when we started thinking in terms of creating a facility for thousands of people at one location and be able to handle that. And for that, you needed a fair amount of space and so on. So we experimented with Sholinganallur, but I don't know whether, if you just think of Chennai, by then it had become Chennai at that time. Sholinganallur was really far away. I used to interest people to go there, because when I have to get bought the land and we were starting to construct, there was absolutely no interest in people to go to that faraway place, and therefore we had to work on creating a proper one. And our thinking from a TCS perspective was that the southern part of Chennai was the right place to grow for knowledge-based industries. That's what we have got to do. We worked quite a lot with the government, of course. CII, I got very much involved with CII because that was the time when we felt that we had to go as an industry and association to project. And I'll tell you about this. Tidal Park was the first one that came up, and I was part of although by then TCS facility had come up. Incidentally, Murali Maran was the one who came also for inauguration. Mr. Tata was here and so on. And Murali Maran was the key architect of Tidal Park in terms of the conceptualization came from some of the interesting people, and he personally spent a lot of time in terms of ensuring that would come up. But that became an iconic one, because that signaled to any of the overseas software houses and organization that they could come to a place which was no different from what they would find in the United States and other places. And more importantly, they could plug and play. There were communication facilities that were available, and people can just move there. And there were, you could take 10,000 square feet, and the minimum you could take was 3,500. So, and then we conceptualized saying that why don't we create the whole corridor? And I remember when I was the Southern Region Chairman of CII, so I went to Tarun Das, who was the Director General, and so I said, how do I pitch this? So he said, this is the best year for you. Jayalalitha was going to come for the inauguration, for the annual, one of the meetings, National Council meetings. And why didn't you talk about that? And we did, that was when she had come back to power in 2001, and we pitched this very much in terms of creating a knowledge industry township, a term that she herself used it in one of her, in the budget speech that year. And we felt that that was the corridor that had needed to come in. And subsequently, almost every company came in there. whether it is Infosys. Infosys came and took a reasonably big plot of land there. Wipro was planning. Polaris had already created a bigger facility at that one. I don't know how many of you remember a company called Pentafor, which was which had come in, and many others, you know. And then slowly we attracted, of course, Satyam came in, but not in the OMR at that point in time. Many others came in, and now you see that almost all the global places. And the reason and the thing that we did at that time, from a TCS-led initiative, but then of course Cognizant had also come in at that time, and everyone got involved through the CI platform, was that we needed to create a township, not just workplaces, but something where people can live in and so on. And now you see this phenomenal kind of development that has taken place. So overall, the manner in which Madras and then Chennai came up in this was as a result of the key thing with regard to the people availability, and it's still one of the most attractive places in terms of competence, development of competence in the IT field and so on, and enormous amount of availability of that. And the second one was the ability to develop a township. I mean, we were not pioneers because Bangalore had moved to the electronic city and so on, so there was an example there. But these were two very important places at that time. Now you see the same model getting adopted in places like Hyderabad, besides of course Bangalore, Pune, which has become a very natural place. Calcutta, if you go to Salt Lake and so on, it's a phenomenal kind of development. And you go to Noida, you go to Gurgaon, not Noida, Gurgaon, Noida to some extent, but mainly Gurgaon, and so on. All these places, and of course Mumbai, because that was the big hub, have the same characteristics, which is in terms of availability of people. Those are the natural places for anyone to move to in India. Of course, there are other places vying for it. Even Tamil Nadu, you've got Coimbatore, which is coming up reasonably well. Madurai is coming up reasonably well. But to attain the scale that Chennai has done, attain the scale that Bangalore has, Bangalore of course has progressed far more, and I'll come to that. And to attain the scale that